Hey guys, happy Tuesday. If you're watching on Tuesday, we are back for some math here. I'm going to go over what you had yesterday after our video ended. We were left off with these 1 through 6 problems, and we'll preview our next ones. Today's much the same, just going to practice the same skill and get a little more work with it. Not too bad. You got 8 problems after these, and then we'll keep moving through. Okay, so we're working on adding and subtracting fractions with unlike denominators. So remember yesterday what we were doing was we have to first find a common denominator, and then we just add those numerators up, and then the last step is to look to put into simplest form. Okay, I'm going to go through these ones again. Hopefully you got these finished and accomplished. If you had to watch the video like right now to go over any that were a little confusing, that's cool. But let's work on again trying our best to just get down with that process. Okay. I'm going to look at each one a little bit here, and we're going to go through the different pieces we have, and we're going to talk about, again, first thing is make sure we get a common denominator. Sometimes we'll get that least common denominator. Sometimes we won't, and that's okay. We just have to always look for simplest form, okay? So let's go ahead and do that with the ones we have here. If we have 5 twelfths plus 1/3, in this case, our common denominator we can use is going to be 12. So what I'm actually going to do, I'm going to fill in 12s kind of all the way in here. 12 here, 12 here, and our answer will be in 12ths too. And we're going to start with that, and then we'll see if we need to put it into simplest form. I made these like little arrows to show like we can put it into simplest form if we need to. We won't have to for all of these. But again, the nice thing with these, if we use 12ths, this is already 12, so I can keep that a 5. That's an easy one to do. Okay, we don't have to worry about that. It's already in 12ths. Now we have to think if we're going from 1/3 and putting it to 12ths, how do we get there? Again, the way we can look at that real quick is just make an equivalent fraction by multiplying by however much we need to for the denominator and do the same for the numerator. So in this case, if I go from 3 to 12, what would be the multiplication fact that gets me to 12? 3 times 4. So that means if I go 3 times 4, that makes 12. I have to do the same thing for my numerator. So 1 times 4 is going to give me the appropriate numerator that's going to make an equivalent fraction here. And of course, that's going to be 4. All right. Now, the easy thing, we're ready to add. Now we've got common denominators, so we're allowed to add our numerators. And again, those denominators are going to stay the same. 5 plus 4, of course, that's a simple fact we know. 5 plus 4 is 9. And that's good. That's our answer. Now, again, what we want to do is check for simplest form. If we look at 9/12, we do have a number we can divide each of these by. It's not 2 because 9's an odd number. But if you look at 9 and 12, there is a common factor among them we can divide each by, and that's 3. All right. When 9 we can divide by 3, 12 we can divide by 3. And when we do that, we're going to get to an equivalent fraction that's in simplest form. Okay, so it's kind of like we're shrinking it back down. It still represents the same amount, but it's in the simplest form. Okay, so if I think I can divide each of these by 3, then I can say, okay, 9 divided by 3 would be 3. And 12 divided by 3 would be how much? Would be 4. Okay, so here, this is our final answer in simplest form. We've got 3/4. Okay, so when we add it all up, when we find our equivalent fractions with common denominators, we get to 9/12, and then we add and we get 3/4. We get 9/12 when we simplify to 3/4 when we divide by that common factor. Okay, so that is going to be our final best answer. Okay, great. Okay. Looking at number 2, let's see. Now here we have 5 and 7, and unfortunately, those aren't really numbers that have a whole lot in common. And so in this case, our least common denominator is actually going to be, if we multiply these two, we're going to get 35. Now again, that's not super fun to work with 35ths, but we're working on the math skills here. So we're going to actually use 35 for a common denominator. Let's talk about how we get our numerators to be helping us have equivalent fractions. Okay, if I have 2/5 and I know I need to make it into 30/5, again, I found 35 by multiplying my two denominators. That's one thing we can always do that'll always work. And in this case, it's the best way to go. If I have 2/5 and I make those into 30/5, think again, my denominator, I go from 5 to 35. I would multiply by how much to get to there? I would multiply by 7, okay? So I need to do the same thing with my numerator in this case. To go from 2/5 to 30/5, 5 times 7 makes 35. 2 times 7 will give me my appropriate numerator. 2 times 7, of course, is 15, okay? Now let's look at the other one. 3/7, if I go from 7ths to 35ths, how do I go from 7 to 35? I would have to multiply that one by 5, okay? So then I have to do the same for my numerator. 3 times 5 is going to make 15. And so here's my equivalent fraction for that. So now I've got 14 35ths and I've got 15 35ths. So I can add these together because, again, I've got the common denominator and I can tell how many total 35ths I have. So if I do this case, 14 plus 15, again, you might have to stack them off to the side if you need to. That's totally fine, but that's going to make 29 35ths. Now, again, if we look at these, 29 is a prime number, but if we look at it for any common numbers we can divide by, there aren't any, okay? So in this case, 29 35ths is in simplest form. It's kind of a yucky looking fraction, but that is going to be our simplest form answer. So in this case, we don't really need to worry about that part there, okay? So there's where we can look at that. I'm going to do another one here, number 3, where I'm going to use the same strategy as I did for 2, but it's not going to be my least common denominator. This will help us talk about how we can clean these up if we need to, okay? For number 3, we have 6th and 4th. Now, the least common denominator in this case, if you may have done that and seen it, is 12. But I think maybe a lot of us may have thought if I just multiply those, I can get 24. And again, a lot of times that's like an easy way to just go, especially when we're starting to get used to working with fractions again. So I'm going to use 24 for a common denominator. I'm going to show you how that might mean we need to simplify in the end. If I already know my least common denominator would be 12, then I may not have to put it into simplest form. But if I start by multiplying here to make 24, that works. That's going to help us out. But it will add the step of having us have to put those into simplest form by reducing, kind of like we did for number 1. Okay. So if I say, let's say again, if you saw this would have 12 in common, that's great. If you would just getting used to it and doing the strategy of just multiply the denominators to get a common denominator, that would be 24. And I'm just going to show you this one again. You may have used 12. Did, that's awesome. If not, if you did use 24, that's fine too. I'll just show you how we have to, again, keep an eye out for having to put in the simplest form if we do it this way, okay? So let's go through that now. Again, common denominators, equivalent fractions. If I go from 6th to 24th, 6 times 4 would make 24. So I've got to do the same thing with my numerator up top, and that's going to be 1 times 4 would be 4, okay? So there's our equivalent fraction. 1/6 is equal to 4 24ths. Then we can do the same thing with 3/4. Now again, I got to look at my denominator, 4, and I go to 24. 4 times what would make 24? That'd be 6. So I go to 4 times 6 makes 24. So then I have to do 3 times 6 up top, which would make 3 times 6 would make 18. So 18 24ths is equal to 3/4. Okay. Now again, I've got my common denominators. I can add my numerators. 4 plus 18 is 22. And then we get an answer there. But again, that answer is not in simplest form yet. Now, if I just told you the least common denominator is 12, if I look at these, 22 and 24 are both even numbers, so I can divide those each by 12. And hey, look at that. When I do that, 24 divided by 2 would be 12. 22 divided by 2 would be 11, and that's going to be my answer. Okay. Now, if you did this using 12ths as your common denominator, you would have gotten right to this answer in the end, okay? But either way, we should get to the same answer, okay? So no matter what, we always want to have the same answer in simplest form. Again, if you saw 6 and 4 have 12 in common, and you start off with just 12ths as your common denominator, you would have gotten 11 12ths right away. Again, okay to do it the way I did, and that's why I did it that way. But that way we see that we've got, again, simplest form, putting it in the simplest form at the end if we have to, okay? All right, I'm going to try to go through the other ones now. These are subtracting. Now, again, with these, we're going to subtract, so just think about switching your mind to subtraction. Pay attention to plus and minus. I think on these first few examples, we're kind of just adding and then subtracting, but sometimes they might be mixed, okay? So watch out for that. But let's talk about these. So if I use 3/4 minus 1/8, again, with this one, I can get, and this is a nice case where I can go and use eighths as my common denominator. So I'm going to do that because I can get from 4 to 8 and then use 8 for my common denominator. Okay, which is nice because 1/8 can stay 1/8. I don't have to worry about that one. And then let's think if I go from 3/4 to eighths, 4 times 2 would make 8. So I've got to do 3 times 2 to get to my equivalent fraction, which would be 6/8. Okay, so in this case, all we had to do was 3/4 becomes 6/8. Then I can do 6/8 minus 1/8 because we know, of course, 6 minus 1 is 5. And in this case, that's already in simplest form. I can't divide 5 or 8 by a number in common, so this is going to be our simplest form already. Okay, so that's kind of a quick one. Isn't that nice? That's great. Okay. Let's keep going now. Now again, when we see these sevens, usually these sevens kind of mess things up for us. This is going to be a lot like what we did for number 2. The way to go with this one is going to be to multiply the denominators. And again, that's going to get us a common denominator. And in this case, that's going to be our least common denominator as well. We're going to do 28. 4 times 7, of course, is 28. And again, not the nicest. When I say that, it means it's just kind of a bigger number. It's not always fun to work with, but we can work out the math just the same, okay? So now let's again do our equivalent fractions. 1/4, I would multiply 4 times 7 to get to 28. So then I have to multiply my numerator by 7 as well. So of course, 1 times 7 is just going to give us 7. And 1/7, I have to do the same. So 1/7, an equivalent fraction in 28. I would multiply 7 times 4 to get to 28. So then I have to do 1 times 4 to get to the numerator. So 1 times 4, of course, is 4. And then, of course, we're ready to subtract 7 minus 4. Easy peasy, that's 3. And here's another one where we actually don't have any number we can divide these each by. 3 is a prime number, and it's pretty small already. So this is going to be our final answer already in simplest form. Okay? All right, great. Let's do number 6 now. Now, number 6, I'm going to do a lot like what I did with number 3, okay? Again, sometimes when you look at 10 and 4, you might think, well, I can multiply and make 40. You could also find another common factor, which is 20. So if you did that, that's awesome. Again, if you didn't, that's okay too, but we might have to look at putting these into simplest form. So I'm going to use the strategy of multiplying my denominators, 10 and 4, and again, those will be common. There'll be a common denominator, but it may not be in simplest form, okay? So if I do 10 times 4, I'm just going to think of it that way. And again, I'm sure a lot of us did that, and that's totally awesome. 10 times 4, of course, is 40. So I'm going to use 40 for my common denominators here. And then again, we might have to look at how we can put these into simplest form if we need to, okay? So let's go ahead and do the common denominators use the equivalent fractions here. 10 times 4 would give me 40. So if I'm going from 9/10 into 40ths, I've got to multiply my numerator by 4. So that means 9 times 4 will give me my appropriate numerator. 9 times 4, of course, is 36. There's that. Then we can do our next one. If we're going from 1/4 to 40ths, we have to think, okay, from 4 to 40, I would multiply that by 10. 1 times 10 for my numerator is going to give me the equivalent fraction. 1 times 10, of course, is 10. So there we've got this. So really, we can say 9/10 minus 1/4 is the same as 36 40ths minus 10 40ths. Now again, sometimes just depending on the fraction, we might have large numbers here. And then again, we'll have to put them into simplest form. 36 minus 10, again, now we're subtracting, is going to be 26. And again, when we get here, we always want to check and make sure we're in simplest form. Again, like I said yesterday, anytime we see a numerator and denominator that are both even numbers, we can divide them by 2. So that's always a good place to start. If I divide 40 divided by 2, of course, we know that's going to give us 20. And if I have to do the same thing, again, to put it in simplest form, we divide by the same number that we have in common. 40 divided by 2 gives me 20. 26 divided by 2 would give me 13. And when we get to that, that's going to be our simplest form answer, okay? Now, again, if you're one of those that are seeing like 10 and 4 would have 20 as a least common denominator, you would get to that 13/20ths right away. If you are using the strategy of multiplying the denominators together to find a common denominator, again, that's always going to work, but it may not be in simplest form at the end. So definitely want to make sure in that case, you always check and see. So here I've got all my answers that are in simplest form. Sometimes they end up in simplest form just as we go. Sometimes we have to do a little bit of extra work to put them into simplest form in the end. Either way, we should all get the same final answer, okay? Awesome, great. Okay, we're doing good. Let's go ahead real quick. What you got today for that little extra practice is to go to page 377. And we've got these, just numbers 7 through 14 are what you're going to work on for me, okay? So just these ones here. You'll definitely want to do that on some separate paper. Looks like you're going to need the space. If you are not sure of some of these trip you up a little bit, just go ahead and watch my next video for Wednesday, because Wednesday's video is going to be to just go over a few of these, and then we'll look at the next stuff, okay? So again, today for Tuesday, finish up, just get a little extra practice with these ones. Same process, find those common denominators by making equivalent fractions, and then add or subtract, and then look for putting those into simplest form, okay? I think you guys are all set. Thanks again for watching. Hope this is helpful, and do a good job on these ones. I'll talk to you on the next video, and we'll go over these. Thanks, guys.